The Iliad by Homer. Book 3. When the leaders had assembled their troops, the Trojans advanced with a loud clamor, like the cries of cranes that fill the skies as they set out over the streams of Oceanus, fleeing winter storms and terrifying rains, carrying death and destruction to the pygmies, and waging wicked war in the early morning hours. But the fire-breathing Achaeans moved silently, eager and ready to protect one another. And just as the south wind pours fog over a mountain, a foe to shepherds put a better friend for thieves than knights. And a man can see only as far as he can throw a stone. So, a dense dust cloud rose from the feet that advanced quickly over the plain. And as the armies closed on one another, godlike Alexander emerged out of the Trojan ranks. With a panther skin on his shoulders, a bent bow on his back, a sword at his side, and two bronze spears in his hands, he challenged any Argive to fight him man to man in grim combat. Mlaunus, dear to Ares, recognized the man who came strutting out of the throng, just as a hungry lion rejoices when he finds a horned deer or wild goat carcass, and eagerly devours it, though swift dogs and mighty hunters draw ever close. So Menelaus rejoiced when he saw Alexander, for he knew his time for vengeance had arrived. He sprang, fully armed, from his chariot and hit the ground. Seeing him standing before the battle line, Alexander's heart shook with deathly horror, and he withdrew into the ranks, just as a man recoils at the sight of a serpent in a forest glen, his limbs trembling uncontrollably, and paleness filling his cheeks as he runs away. So, godlike Alexander, fearing Menelaus, retreated back into the Trojan throng. Seeing this, a disgusted Hector said to him, "Wretched Paris, beautiful deceiver of women, if only you had never been born or had died unwed. Either would be better than these shameful acts that make you a joke to others." The long-haired Achaeans howl with laughter, saying our champion was chosen for his looks, not his strength or spirit. Was this how you gathered your comrades? Sailed over the seas in your sturdy ship, mingled with foreigners, and brought back a beautiful woman, sister of skilled spearmen, and great misery to your father, city, and people. You bring joy to your enemies and disgrace to yourself. Will you not face Menelaus and learn the kind of man he is whose wife you stole? Aphrodite's gifts, your lyre, your locks, and your looks will be no help when you hit the dust. The Trojans are the timid ones. Otherwise they would have stoned you to death for your wicked deeds. In reply, godlike Alexander said to him, "Hector, your reproach is proper and fair. Your heart is forever like a sharp axe driven into a tree by a skilled shipbuilder, the blade making each cut that much stronger. So also does your sharp spirit intensify your mind's resolve. But do not scorn golden Aphrodite, or dismiss the gods' glorious gifts, for it is their will, not ours, that grants them. But if you wish me to fight, then I will. Have all Trojans and Achaeans sit, but set Menelaus and I in the middle, and we will fight for Helen and her riches. Whoever proves himself the strongest and wins will take the woman and all the wealth and go home, while the rest swear oaths of friendship and trust. And you will live in fertile Troy, while they return to Argos' pastures and the fair women of Achaia. His words pleased Hector, who went straight to the Trojan front line, held the battalions back with his spear, and ordered them to sit. And seeing Hector, the long-haired Achaeans prepared to shoot him with arrows and strike him with stones. But Agamemnon, leader of men, loudly shouted, "Hold, Argives, and cease your fire! Achaean youth!" Flashing-helmed Hector is preparing to speak. Hearing this, they ceased fighting and quickly quieted. Then Hector addressed both armies. "Listen to me, Trojans and well-greaved Achaeans, for Alexander, the source of our strife, has an offer. He urges the other Trojans and all Achaeans to put their fine armor down on the fertile earth, and let Paris and the warrior Menelaus fight, one-on-one, for Helen and her riches. Whoever proves himself the strongest and wins will take the woman and all the wealth and go home, while the rest swear oaths of friendship and trust." So he spoke, and the soldiers all fell silent. Then the great war crier Menelaus said to them, "Listen to me, for the pain in my heart is by far the greatest. I want the Argives and Trojans to part ways, because my quarrel with Alexander, the aggressor, has caused far too much suffering. Whoever is fated to die today, let him die, so the rest can quickly part ways. Now bring 2 different lambs, one white and one black, for earth and sun, and bring another for Zeus. Then send for mighty Priam, so he himself can swear an oath. For his sons are untrustworthy, and any wrongdoing would violate Zeus's oath. Young men's hearts are always blown by passions, but an older man sees both the past and the future, and can find a solution that is best for both sides." End quote. At once, the Achaeans and Trojans rejoiced, hoping this would bring the bitter war to an end. They lined up their chariots, dismounted, stripped off their armor, and set it on the ground in tight rows that left little free space. Then Hector sent 2 heralds hurrying to the city to summon King Priam, and to retrieve 2 lambs, while Agamemnon told Talthybius to head back to the hollow ships and retrieve another lamb, and he did not disobey godlike Agamemnon. But messenger Iris came to white-armed Helen, disguised as her sister-in-law, Lodius, wife of Antenor's son, Helicyon, sister to Paris and Hector, and most beautiful of Priam's daughters. She found her in the palace weaving a purple folded cloak, adorned with battle scenes between the horse-tamer Trojans and bronze-clad Achaeans, all for her sake. Standing beside Helen, swift-footed, Iris said to her, "Come, dear maiden, and witness the horse-tamer Trojans and bronze-clad Achaeans, where once their battles brought countless tears to the deadly plains, Now the fighting has ceased, and they sit in silence, leaning on their shields, their long spears fixed to the earth. For Alexander and Menelaus will fight in single combat, all for you. He who wins will call you his beloved wife. End quote. The goddess's words brought to Helen's soul sweet longing for her former husband, her city, and her parents. With round tears in her eyes, she covered herself with a white cloth and raced from her chambers, followed by two handmaids, Aethria, daughter of Pythias, and ox-eyed Clymene. Soon they arrived at the Scaean gates. Priam sat by the Scaean gates with his council of elders, Panthos, Thymoetes, Lampus, Clytius, Hictaon, son of Ares, and the shrewd strategists Ercolagon and Antenor. Old age prevented them from fighting, but they were fine orators, like cicadas that sit in a forest tree and let loose their lily-like voices. These were the Trojan elders who sat on the tower. And when they noticed the approaching Helen, they quietly spoke to one another, saying, quote, "The Trojans and Achaeans cannot be faulted for suffering so much for so long for such a woman. To look at her is to see a goddess in the flesh. All the same, she should go home in the longships and spare us and our children further misery." So they spoke. But Priam said to Helen, "Come, dear child, and sit beside me, so you can see your former husband, your kinsmen, and your people. For it was not you, but the gods, who started this woeful war with the Achaeans. Now tell me, who is this powerful Achaean warrior, so brave and tall? There are certainly others who are taller in stature, but I have not set eyes on one so well favored, and so majestic. Clearly this man is a king." And Helen, noblest of women, replied to him, "Beloved father-in-law, whom I both revere and fear, if only foul death had taken me when I followed your son here and left my marriage bed, my kin, my lovely daughter, my childhood companions. But that was not to be. So I pine away in tears. But you asked about this man, so let me answer. He is Agamemnon, son of Atreus, lord of many lands, a worthy king, a mighty warrior, and brother-in-law to my dog-eyed soul, unless that was but a dream." End quote. So she said, and the old man in wonder told her, "The son of Atreus is a child of fortune, whom the gods bless and many Achaean youths obey. Long ago I journeyed to Phrygia, rich in vines, where I saw countless warriors and their nimble steeds, the men of Otreus and godlike Mygdon, encamped beside the Sangarius river. I was among their allies on the day the Amazons, a match for men, came. But not even they could match the quick-glancing Achaeans. And next, upon seeing Odysseus, the old man asked, 'Now tell me, dear child, who is this other man? He is a head shorter than Agamemnon, but looks broader in the shoulders and chest. His battle armor lies upon the fertile earth, but he seems to go around inspecting the lines of soldiers like a thick-fleeced bellwether ram as it passes through a large flock of white ewes.' Then Helen, born of Zeus, answered him, 'That is the son of Laertes, cunning Odysseus, who was raised in the rugged land of Ithaca, and knows all kinds of tricks and shrewd schemes. In reply, wise and sensible Antenor said to her, "Yes, all the things you say, young lady, are true. For King Odysseus and Menelaus, dear to Ares, came to us once as part of an embassy. I hosted the guests and entertained them in my halls, and I got to know both men's stature and cunning. And when they stood before the Trojan assembly, Menelaus towered over him with his wide shoulders. But when they sat, Odysseus was more dignified. When they began to weave their web of words, Menelaus spoke clearly without stumbling, but said little, since he was a man of few words and not one to ramble, though he was younger. But when Odysseus sprang up, he stood stock still, his eyes fixed to the ground, his scepter held stiff to the floor, moving neither forwards or backwards like a man of ignorance. I hosted the guests and entertained them in my halls, and I got to know both men's stature and cunning. And when they stood before the Trojan assembly, Menelaus towered over them with his wide shoulders. But when they sat, Odysseus was more dignified. When they began to weave their web of words, Menelaus spoke clearly, without stumbling, but said little, since he was a man of few words, and not one to ramble, though he was younger. But when Odysseus sprang up, he stood stock still, his eyes fixed to the ground, his scepter held stiff to the floor, moving neither forwards or backwards, like a man of ignorance. You would have thought him a surely senseless fool. But when his great voice burst from his chest, his words falling like snowflakes in a winter storm, then no mortal man could challenge Odysseus. And after that, Odysseus' appearance was forgotten. Seeing a third man, Ajax, the old king asked, "Who is that third Achaean, strong and wide, standing head and shoulders above the Argives?" And fair Helen, in her flowering robes, replied, "That is mighty Ajax, defender of the Achaeans, and godlike Idomeneus stands on the other side, among the other Cretan leaders. Menelaus would often entertain him when he journeyed to our home from Crete. And now I see the other quick-glancing Achaeans, and I remember them well, and can tell you their names. But there are two leaders missing, horse-tamer Castor and great fighter Polydeuces, my brothers, born from the same mother. Either they did not follow from lovely Lacedaemon, or they sailed here in their seafaring ships, but did not wish to join with the soldiers in battle, for fear of the insults and abuse heaped upon me." So she said, but they were in Lacedaemon, their father's land, buried in the life-giving earth. Now heralds carried across the city offerings to the gods, 2 lambs and a goatskin bag filled with earth-grown, heart-warming wine. Idaeus, carrying a shining bowl and a golden goblet, stood by the old king and called upon him. Come, son of Laomedon, for the horse-taming Trojans and bronze-clad Achaeans summon you to the plain to swear solemn oaths of trust. For Alexander and Menelaus are to fight each other with long spears for the sake of Helen. The victor will win the woman and her wealth, while the rest swear oaths of friendship and trust. We will return to the fertile soil of Troy, and they to horse-rich Argos and Achaea's fair women. Hearing this, the king shuddered, but ordered men to yoke his horses, and they quickly obeyed. Priam mounted his chariot and drew back the reins, and with him was Antenor. Then they drove the swift horses out of the Scaean gates. And when they reached the Trojans and Achaean armies, they stepped down from their chariots and walked between the armies. Agamemnon and wily Odysseus then rose, and the noble heralds brought the offerings for the gods, mixed the wines into the bowl, and poured water over the hands of the kings. Atreus' son took into his hand a dagger he always held in the sheath beside his sword, and cut wool from the heads of the lambs, which the heralds offered to the Trojan and Achaean leaders. Then Agamemnon lifted his hands and prayed, Great and glorious Father Zeus, who rules from Ida, and Helios, who sees and hears all, and the rivers and earth, and those who dwell below, and punish men who swear falsely. Be witnesses and guard the sanctity of sacred oaths. If Alexander kills Menelaus, then let him have Helen and all of her possessions, while we return to our ships and sail across the sea to our homes. But if fair-haired Menelaus kills Alexander, then let Troy give up Helen and all her wealth, and pay the Argives a fitting recompense, one that will be remembered by future generations. But if Alexander falls, and Priam's sons are unwilling to pay the price, then I will remain and fight for my blood ransom, and I will not stop fighting until the war is over. Then he cut the lambs' throats with his ruthless blade, and placed them on the ground grasping for breath, for the knife had seized their souls. Then the two kings drew wine out of the bowl with goblets and poured it out, and Achaeans and Trojans alike prayed to the eternal gods. Great and glorious Zeus, and all other immortals, should any defy these solemn oaths, let their brains and their children's brains be poured onto the ground like this wine, and let their wives be taken by others. So they prayed, but Cronos' son did not answer. Then Priam, son of Dardanus, said to them, Listen, Trojans and well-greaved Achaeans, I am returning home to wind-blown Ilios, for I could not endure seeing with my own eyes my dear son battling Menelaus, dear to Ares. Only Zeus and the other immortal gods know which of the two is destined by fate to die today. So saying, the godlike man had the lambs placed in his well-wrought chariot, which he then mounted. Once Antenor was beside him, Priam drew back the reins and returned to Ilios. Then Priam's son Hector and godlike Odysseus measured out a space and together cast lots in a helmet tipped with bronze to decide who would be the first to throw his bronze spear. And all Achaeans and Trojans raised their hands to the gods and offered their prayers, saying, Father Zeus, ruler of Ida, glorious and great, whoever caused these troubles for both sides, may he die and head to the house of Hades, and may the rest of us swear oaths of friendship. And as they prayed, gleaming-helmed Hector shook the lots, looking away, and the lot for Paris leapt out. Then the soldiers sat down and rose, each beside his horse and well-wrought armor. Godlike Alexander, fair Helen's husband, put his splendid armor on his shoulders, wrapped the greaves around his legs, and fastened them to his ankles with a silver buckle. Next he covered his chest with his brother Lycaon's breastplate, which fit him well, and slung over his shoulders his silver-studded bronze sword, and great and sturdy shield. And on his head he put a sturdy horsehair crest helmet, topped with a fierce, nodding plume. And he took up a stout spear that fit his hand perfectly, and Menelaus geared for battle in the same way. Once armed, the men stood between the two armies, glaring harshly at one another. And wonder seized the onlookers, the horse-taming Trojans, and well-greaved Achaeans. The two stood near the marked-off space, each brandishing a spear and boiling with rage. Alexander shot first, and his long-shadowed spear struck the well-balanced shield of Atreus' son, but did not pierce it. Instead, the sturdy shield bent the spearhead. Then, as Menelaus readied to launch his lance, he prayed to Father Zeus. Lord Zeus, grant me revenge on Alexander, who wronged me, and let my hands slay him, so generations to come may recoil at the thought of harming a host who offers friendship. So saying, he hurled the long-shadowed spear and struck Paris's well-balanced shield, piercing the shield and the richly adorned breastplate, tearing into his tunic and reaching his flank. But Paris turned to one side and escaped death's darkness. Then Menelaus drew his silver-studded sword and struck the ridge of Paris's helmet, but the sword broke into 3 or 4 pieces and fell from his hand. Groaning, the son of Atreus looked to the heavens and cried, Father Zeus, no other god is as dangerous as you. I thought I had revenge for Alexander's wrongs, but I lost my sword when it shattered and my spear when it flew from my hand and missed its target. Menelaus then lunged at his helmet's horsehair crest, and with a spin, dragged him to the Achaean line. The well-stitched strap holding the helmet in place stretched Paris's chin, choking his tender throat. And Menelaus would have dragged him away and gained eternal glory, had Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus, not broken the helmet's oxhide strap, leaving Menelaus holding an empty helmet. He turned and threw the helmet at the Achaeans, and his comrades picked it up. Then he turned back, intent on attacking Paris with his bronze spear. But Aphrodite, with the ease of a goddess, grabbed Paris, covered him in a mist, and sent him back to his sweet-scented bedroom. Then she went to summon Helen, who was on the high wall, ringed by a throng of Trojan women. The goddess put her hand on Helen's fragrant robe, shook it, and then spoke to her in the guise of an old woman, a wool dresser from Lacedaemon, who was known to Helen and was especially loved. In this guise, heavenly Aphrodite addressed her. Go now, for Alexander calls you home. He is in the bedchamber, on the bed with inlaid rings, his body and clothes shining, and looking not like a man who just faced a foe, but a man heading to dance, or just come from a dance. Go now, for Alexander calls you home. He is in the bedchamber, on the bed with inlaid rings, his body in clothes shining, and looking not like a man who just faced a foe, but a man heading to a dance, or just come from a dance. So she said, stirring the heart in Helen's breast, seeing the beautiful neck, lovely chest, and sparkling eyes of the goddess. She was filled with awe, and she addressed her, saying, Strange goddess, why this deception? Do you plan to lead me further into shame? To send me to cities like Phrygia or pleasant Maeonia, where another mortal man you favor awaits? Since Melanus has defeated godlike Alexander and wants to lead woeful me back to his home. Is this why you have come to me with trickery? Sit by his side yourself. Quit the way of the gods, never turn around and return to Olympus. But be forever anxious for him and protect him until he makes you his wife, or perhaps his slave. But I will not go there, for it would be a disgrace to share his bed. All Trojan women should blame me hereafter, and my heart has enough grief. End quote. With violent rage, Aphrodite replied to her, Do not anger me, stubborn woman, or I will hate you more deeply than I now love you, and brew bitter hatred for you by both the Trojans and the Danaans, ensuring you a dreadful death. End quote. Her words terrified Helen, daughter of Zeus, who covered herself in a white robe and snuck silently past the Trojan women, led by the goddess. When they arrived at Alexander's majestic house, Helen's handmaids went quickly about their work, while she went to the high-roofed bedchamber. The goddess, ever smiling Aphrodite, took a chair and set it down across from Alexander. Helen, daughter of Aegis, bearing Zeus, sat down, looked away from her husband, and scolded him. You came back from war, but I wish you had died there, slain by a mighty man, my former husband. You once claimed to be greater than Menelaus, dear to Ares, with your hands and spear. Well then, go back and challenge him to another fight, man to man. But no, I urge you not to fight fair-haired Menelaus in single combat or any other reckless way, for you could very well die under his spear. End quote. Paris quickly responded to her words, saying, Do not taunt me with abusive words, woman. Yes, Menelaus beat me today, with Athena's help, but I will win next time, for we have gods as well. But let us go to bed and make love, for I have never felt such desire for you, not even when I first took you from fair Lacedaemon, and sailed with you on my seafaring ships, and made love to you on the island of Crani. No more than ever does sweet love control me. End quote. Then he led the way to the bed, and his wife followed. And while they retired to their inlaid bed, the son of Atreus roamed up and down the battlefield, like a wild beast in search of godlike Alexander. But the Trojans and their famed allies could not point out Alexander to Menelaus, dear to Ares. Had they seen him, they would not have tried to hide him, for they hated him like Black Death. So Agamemnon, ruler of men, addressed them. Hear me, Trojans and Dardanians and allies. Victory clearly belongs to Menelaus, dear to Ares. So surrender the Argive, Helen, and her possessions, and pay to us a fair and just recompense, one that will be reimbursed by future generations. End quote. So said the son of Atreus, and all Achaeans agreed. End of Book 3. Homer, the Iliad.